I'm David Lombardo, and this is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room. In order to ensure New Yorkers living in temporary housing can stay connected with the online world, state lawmakers passed a bill in June requiring shelters to provide access to wireless internet. For more on the measure, we're joined by Daniel Schwarz, Senior Privacy and Technology Strategist at the New York Civil Liberties Union. Thanks for making the time, Daniel.
Good morning, David. Thanks for having me.
And we're also going to hear from Milton Perez, member leader of Vocal New York's Homelessness Union. Thanks for making the time, Milton.
Buenos días.
Well, for starters, most people probably take for granted their connectivity to the internet. So, can you talk to us about why being online matters, especially if you're living without stable housing and maybe trying to get your life in order to some degree?
Yeah, so the apartment that I'm sitting in, I got through Housing Connect, and Housing Connect I used to apply to, which is Housing Lottery here in New York City, through the free Wi-Fi in the subway station. So this is before I went into the hotel shelter during COVID, which is where Wi-Fi for the homeless started. When we arrived there, trying to be nice, trying to make conversation, I asked for the Wi-Fi password that all hotels have, and I was denied. And in the days and weeks to come, Vocal New York got involved, the organizer, Selena at the time. And eventually, what kind of like set people off and got people angry when some staff try to tell people the password. And that's what got people, started. But on a personal level, just me being around, elders or people coming out of prison, trying to help them out, with their phones and people not having Wi-Fi, and just seeing how people were affected, well, not only in physical health, mental health, emotional health, the people that had Wi-Fi access the resources, and the people that didn't, people that were able to be connected to their families, to their doctors, and so on and so forth, and the people that didn't, how people were affected, kind of kept things going to this point.
And Milton, when we talk about the connectivity, is this primarily through people's smartphones? And do most people who are unhoused temporarily or otherwise, do they still have access to smartphones?
Yes, it's much easier to get a phone. You got to maybe get a phone for $20 in one of the dollar stores. But people in New York City, people once you enter shelter, if you have HRA resources, cash assistance, it's I think $180 a month, but that goes down to $45, 22.50 every 2 weeks. I have Medicaid throughout the year, so I didn't know, but I've seen people, making plans, not knowing, and then you only get 22.50 every 2 weeks. So you might be able to get a phone, but not have enough money to get the good Wi-Fi.
Hmm. Well, what sort of internet connectivity is available now in shelters around the state, whether it's something that is a permanent structure designed to be a shelter or maybe hotels that are serving in a temporary capacity? Is there any, I guess, predictability about what someone might experience?
The predictability is not a good word because in New York City alone, there's over 300 shelters run by DHS, and in my opinion, every shelter is run differently. So some shelters may have laptops, some computers, but anything that's available is limited in scope. I remember being in a meeting with the clients and the staff, and but there were two computers, and one had been broken for 6 months. And in those conversations, the assistant director kind of said, people are using computers past 8 p.m. and she shut that down. The people that have been running that program had left the staff, so she took that opportunity to shut that down. So you could not no longer use that one computer past 8 p.m. And in this particular shelter, there were 62 people, which is considered rare. Most shelters in New York City have 200 people, and sometimes even more. So they may have some laptops or some computers, but it's not enough.
We also estimate that only around half of the shelters in New York City currently have any internet access whatsoever. And then Vocal New York and Take Root Justice conducted a survey last year where of the shelter residents that have some type of internet access, more than 80% reported that they face certain challenges, being that they experience frequent internet outages, inconsistent service, slow speeds that were insufficient for conducting any video call, any telehealth appointment or other form of video conferencing, Zoom calls, experiencing other forms of service interruptions, unreliable service, or feeling unsafe in their operations of the internet, whether that's due to security or privacy concerns.
Well, this pending legislation would require Wi-Fi be available in both common areas and private spaces, in shelters, as well as meeting download speeds of at least 1 gigabit per second, upload speeds of the same, or as high as the available speeds are if they don't meet that threshold. Why do those standards make sense? Why is that the right minimum expectation?
In New York City alone, there's over 300 shelters, and like I said, each is run differently. So it has to be a law where people have to do specific things. For
But why
example,
is but why Milton, why is that the right standard? Why should it be required in, say, all common areas and private spaces? Why is 1 gigabit per second of download speed the right download speed to require?
I believe if you have over 200 people in a particular shelter, that might be the best thing. So it's good enough that people can use it. If you leave it up to the shelters, they're going to do what they want to do, what they've been doing. And so it has to be a law, and I guess that's the standard.
We set the asymmetrical speed requirement based on the recommendations of general consensus by technologists across the country to what broadband speeds are accessible to modern day internet usage. We're also not unrealistic there. We defined the language in a way that allows for lower limits based on areas that don't have those speed available in their areas. And then also there's a carve out for completely unserved areas across the state. And the bill also makes clear that there are net neutrality protections, that there's no discrimination based on content, so no censorship on retrieving information, as well as privacy protections because our browsing information is so revealing, and is particularly sensitive when the internet in a shelter is your primary connection to the outside world.
I want to come back to that issue of censorship, but first, when it comes to, say, the speeds and where someone can access internet, is there a reason why it should be done in this blanket top speed number as opposed to saying, well, if you've got 200 people in a shelter, sure, 1 gigabit of download speed per second makes sense. But if it's a shelter that's serving 20 people, that's probably in excess of what they actually need. So, how did you come to this sort of broad standard as opposed to maybe setting this per person so that you could have more flexibility based on the size and scope of an operation?
It is in line with most commercial internet contracts that are available now. And the standard is really to go for symmetric access up and down speeds because of how much bigger our bandwidth demands are nowadays with video conferencing and uploading video at the same time. And so really, when we look towards fiber connections, the 1 gig up and down is the standard that is out there. And I think we're setting us up for success by being future-proof with that baseline rate while allowing for lower speeds in those areas that are underserved.
And in terms of this idea of censorship, does that mean that if someone wants to navigate the internet in a homeless shelter, they'll have access to any website that they want to potentially visit? And if that is the case, why does that make more sense than saying restricting access so that it is just to websites that might help a person get their life back online or to meet their basic needs?
I mean, there's all kind of rules in the shelter, as far as people using their phone in the dorm where people are sleeping, that sort of thing. But it's just, and there's not for you're asking about policing people. There's not enough staff, to do that. By the way, I was in a dorm with 20 people. I don't know any shelter that's 20 people, maybe upstate. But within the dorm, we have our own rules. So as far as things, people doing weird things, I don't think that's going to happen, which is people are concerned about. And I don't think most people, act in that manner. This is regular people that just happen to be homeless. Most of the shelters in the city are family shelters, at least over half. So for the single adult shelters, these are people over 18. We police ourselves. We keep ourselves safe. So I don't think it's that big of a concern, in my opinion.
And I would also stress that any type of censorship or blocking of website will always fall disproportionately on marginalized communities. We often see reporting of certain entities blocking websites that would deliver absolutely appropriate content. And so we believe that the best access that is provided there would be a blanket access, and we strongly support net neutrality across the spectrum.
So then no issue accessing pornography, gambling websites, sort of any sort of vice stuff in a homeless shelter?
Yeah, no blocking of any websites whatsoever.
So back in May, the Hochul administration announced they would spend, I think, $20 million to bring high-speed internet to homeless shelters. Will this cover the implementation costs of this bill, or do you imagine that additional dollars would have to be spent to actually realize this, given the scope of how many shelters there are and how this is sort of like an evolving target?
In our estimate, 5 to 10 million
Oh,
should cover it.
in addition to what the governor's already put aside?
No,
Oh,
no. So in our estimates, that funding allocation should cover it.
hmm.
But I think the legislation is very important to be future-proof, to not just fund this program for this year, next year, but rather to ensure that shelter residents have a lifeline into the future, that we can be sure that this program keeps being funded and that our shelters across the state provide this important utility for everyone into the future, and that doesn't run out in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years.
Yeah, the shelter system in the city is funded in the billions of dollars. So to me, to people that have been in the shelter, providing Wi-Fi with the funding that's available should not be an issue. So this 5 to 10 million doesn't seem like much to provide a base, something that is basic in 2026.
And assuming this bill gets signed into law, what does meaningful oversight and policing of this look like? And I guess how much wiggle room do you give to these operators if power goes out, or maybe there's a slow room in a shelter that doesn't really meet the speeds? What does successful implementation look like from that perspective?
Think we'll have to work very closely with implementers, with providers, with residents in hearing what it looks like after a year, what experiences on the ground are. The legislation doesn't have a built-in enforcement model, and so I think we will have to take it as it comes and work with all stakeholders closely together in ensuring an equitable, accessible, and reliable service throughout. And I think the legislation takes a comprehensive approach in really making clear what the values are behind this and how residents should be able to be using it.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this conversation. We've been speaking with Milton Perez. He's a member leader of Vocal New York's Homelessness Union. Thank you so much for making the time, Milton.
Thank you to the youth, thank you to the advocates, the organizers, and the lawyers, and the politicians that make this happen.
And we've also been hearing from Daniel Schwarz, Senior Privacy and Technology Strategist at the New York Civil Liberties Union. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you so much, David, and thank you to the listeners.
Thanks for listening to today's edition of the Capitol Press Room. For an insider take on what's happening in state government, check out our Dispatches from Planet Albany show, available wherever you get podcasts or at capitolpressroom.org.
Join us again for Capitol Press Room, a production of WCNY Connected, Syracuse.